Hello fellow Blenderers, this is Peter here with PM Designs. In this video we're going to be talking about regeneration. This is part one of what I've planned to do, like 3 parts, but I don't have time to make that many videos a week or such a long video. So this is just going to be cuts, burns maybe, basically skin surface damage, and then I'm going to make a video for bullet wounds and whatever, like holes in the body, maybe like a big katana gash in his arm or something. And then there's going to be a video for like growing back entire limbs. So if you're interested to see those, make sure you hit the notification bell and you'll be notified when they are published. Anyway, let's get on with this. So I've got Wolverine here, obviously, because we're doing regeneration or X Factor healing power, whatever you call it. I'm doing this in Blender 3.1 so that my screencast keys works. So I'm just going to bring this up and turn this into a shader editor. I downloaded this model, I can't remember where from, and all I did to it was re-rig it. So the materials here, I've just renamed one of them to clothes, so I know which one that is, and the other one to face skin, which is actually his arm skin as well. But anyway, what I'm going to do first is start off with like a scratch on the face, like he cut himself shaving or something, and then I'll talk about how you can add it onto the clothes, considering the fact that this model doesn't have separate clothes. If you have separate clothes, it's easier. If the model doesn't have separate clothes and it's all one material like this one, then you have to kind of try to make it look good. But anyway, so let's get on with a scratch on his face. So first I have to decide whereabouts on his face I want the scratch to be. So I'm going to tab into edit mode and I'm going to select this vertex, for example. Shift and S, and I'm going to add the cursor to selected. Okay, then I'm going to add an empty in there. And I'm going to scale that down just so it's reasonable. And I'm going to apply the scale, not anything else, just the scale. And so I need to rename this empty, and I'm going to call it cut control. You call it whatever you want to. And I'm going to also make sure that it follows him wherever he goes. So I'm going to add a child of constraint. Okay, and the target is going to be the rig. Okay, and so I just want to find out which bone is the best one. And that's going to be cheek TL.001. Okay, you can see that up there if you pop into pose mode and select the bone. So I'm going to hide that for a moment, grab my empty again, and find cheek TL.001. Clear inverse, set inverse. So now if I pose him, that empty is going to follow wherever he goes. So the cut will stay in the same place. Right, so let's get on with this cut. It's really easy, very simple. What I'm going to do is start off with a simple version and then show you some ways to make it a little bit more advanced. But I'm not going to spend too long on making the cut. I'm just talking about the principle of the regeneration here. So I've got a base color here going into principal BSDF and my material output. Let's just tidy this up a bit. And all I'm going to do this with is like a gradient mask. So add a gradient. And if you've got Node Wrangler enabled, edit, preferences, Node Wrangler. Yeah, this one, enable that. So then I select my gradient texture and press Ctrl and T. And I get the texture coordinate and mapping node. If you don't have Node Wrangler, you should, but if you don't, you can just manually search for a texture coordinate and a mapping node and connect those up. And I'm going to use the texture coordinate of an object into my mapping node, and the object is going to be my cut control, or whatever you've called it. Okay, set this gradient texture to spherical. All right, and what I'm going to do is Control Shift and left click, just so we can plug that straight in there, and we can see exactly what the gradient's doing. So now I'm going to add in a color ramp, pop that in there, set it to constant, and just bring that down a little bit. Okay, so now you can see we're making our mark here. I would personally like this to be a little bit further away, so I'm just going to increase the scale of my gradient here so I can move that back, just so I can see it more clearly. Let's increase it to like 10. Yeah, something like that. So now I'm going to use my mapping node to set the shape of my wound. So if you wanted to have like a burn, you could leave it kind of round, but I'm going for a cut at the moment. So all I'm going to do is increase the Z scale here, which will make it smaller on the Z, sort of more horizontal. And also we could rotate it here, but I'm going to use my cut control, my empty. I'm just going to rotate that on the X so I can rotate my cut however I like. Okay. Let's make our cut look a little bit more interesting before we go into any other details. So I'm going to mix this gradient texture with a noise texture, so that will deform this mask, deform the circle here. So just add in a noise texture and a mix RGB. Just pop that in there. Okay, and then I'm going to bring my factor down a little bit here, and so now I just need to adjust things again to get some more kind of detail in that cut. Maybe something like that. Yeah, just mess with your distortion. This is all kind of personal preference, but I want a little bit of distortion. And what I might do is Control Shift and duplicate this mapping node, because I still want to use the object as a texture coordinate, but maybe I want to change my noise a little bit. So plug that in there, and so now I can bring this back down to like 1. And with this, like, we could, you know, you can have some more control over how the scratch looks, so you get these kind of connected bits if you wanted to do that. So then you could have that factor in when you're healing. Yeah, so something like that will do for now. Yeah, so now I just need to make like a basic wound color. Come down here, add in a color ramp, and then, you know, this is just for a basic example. You feel free to do what you like. I'm going to add in a noise texture again. I could have just duplicated that other one. And let's get this set on UV. Plug that factor into the color ramp here, and now I want like my bloody colors, my wound colors, so like a dark red and another dark red, a darker red, something like that. Okay, and now let's just plug this straight into here for now, and then connect this one back up, just so I can see how my color ramp is looking here with the noise. Increase that scale massively. Something like that will do. Okay, so plug back in my base color to the principal BSDF, add in a mix RGB. So now we're actually going to add the cut on to his face, and then my bloody mess whatever is going to go into the second color, and then this gradient is just going to control the factor, and that's it. But that is basically the setup for healing this wound, because now we've got the cut control, the empty, and all I have to do is scale that on the local Z axis, or, you know, you can scale it, just scale it down, but I think it looks better if I scale it on the Z, and it's going to close up like that. And if I scale it to Z0, he's healed completely without a scar somehow. Okay, anyway, so let's just make this look a little bit better. Like I said, I'm not going to make this look really good. This video is more about how to do the healing, but also I'm going to show you just how to make the wound look a little bit better. So I want to make the wound look like it's in, yeah, so his skin is on top. So all I have to do for that is add in a bump node and plug that into the normal down here. And then, so first I want this outer edge to have bump, so the wound is actually inside, and I'm just going to use the color ramp here for that. Plug that into this height of this bump, plug that into the height of this bump node. Okay, so now maybe you can't see it, but the wound is actually sitting on top. It looks like it's sticking out, so I'm just going to invert that. Okay, so now it gives the impression that the skin is on top. Not amazing, but it's there. Okay, right, and so now I want to add bump to the gory stuff that's inside. So this is getting a little bit more advanced now, but not difficult. It's not difficult at all. I'm just going to duplicate this bump node and pop it in there. Yeah, and so if you're ever stacking bump nodes, just bear in mind that the first bump node normal should be connected to the normal of the second bump node, and then so on, so on, so on. So now I want to bring my bloody stuff into the height of this bump node, but there's going to be a problem, but we'll fix it. So I'm just going to plug this right there. Okay, so now the bump is everywhere. Yeah, this noise texture is creating bump everywhere. So I need to use this gradient to control, to limit this bump into the wounded area, which is easy. Add in a mix node, mix RGB, sorry. Okay, and then I'm going to get again, my gradient mask is going to control the factor of this. There's something wrong, but I'll show you in a moment. Plug that into the factor. Okay, so now the bump is on every part of his face, except for the wound. So all I have to do is take this noise texture, take it out of color 1 and plug it into color 2. Okay, so now the wound has some nastiness, and just adjust the strength to whatever you like. You could also do this same kind of thing into the specular and the roughness or whatever, but that's just the basis of my cut. And so now if I press S and Z, the cut's going to heal up. Okay, I'm just going to add in a timeline. And so I set my cut control, set the scale, and then go forward to 50 frames, and then SZ0 and set the scale keyframe. So now I've got that animation playing, and it's much easier to see what goes on. So now also, while it's healing, if you want to, you could go back to this gradient noise texture combo, and while he's healing up, you could mess with the scale of the noise, yeah, or you could do it, keyframe it over here so that bring this one down so there are some longer bits going on, make it look a bit more a bit more fleshy. You could keyframe this distortion. Yeah, so it's not just like a straight scale, but you just keyframe this. So if I go back to this one, press I on distortion, go forward a bit, change the distortion slightly, press I on that. So now as it heals, it's going to kind of deform, not by much, but it just looks a little bit different. Maybe that looks a bit bad. Yeah, if you're ever doing this and you say, oh, where are my keyframes? Why can't I see the keyframes for my noise texture? Just click on the noise texture and then you see your keyframes. So I don't really like that. I'm going to delete those. But you feel free to get in there and mess about and try some different methods with your noise. You could also keyframe the factor here so you could have more noise kicking in as it heals. Yeah, things like that. Okay, right, let's talk about the next thing. The next thing is adding multiple cuts. I'm going to disconnect and tuck away all my bump nodes because I just want to make this nice and easy to follow. I'm going to take these away. So this, just remember, this is my mix, which I need to mix with the color amp for the noise, for the blood. This one I'm going to rename it just so we know, for the whole wound. Let's call it wound outline. Yeah, and I'm going to rename this one to be bloody insides. Okay, so now I've got that there. So just in case you were thinking, all right, so if I wanted to make a second cut up higher or lower, I could duplicate this. It's not really going to work like that, but it's halfway there. So first I'm going to frame up all of these things just to make them very clear. Okay, so I've just framed these just so we can name them and follow them a bit more easily. So this one is going to be called bloody texture, and this one is going to be called wound 1. Yeah, so if you decided maybe you're just going to duplicate this lot, add in another mix node, and then connect this second wound. Oh, we're going to title this one wound 2, and then I could just connect this color amp into the factor of the next mix, bring in my bloody texture as the color 2 input, and then you might think, oh, all I have to do is offset on the location slightly. So if I just do this, I've got 2 cuts. Yeah, cool. But then if we try and scale this cut control down on the Z, that's not going to work too well. So easy fix. Yeah, set this back to 0. Yeah, and I'm going to decide where I want my other cut to be. So I want it, yeah, let's put it here or something. Cursor to selected. Select my cut control, Shift and D to duplicate that, and then Shift S, selection to cursor. Okay, so now that's my cut control 001. So I go back into my shader. This is wound 2, and I'm just going to select the object to be cut control.001. Yeah, so now I've got the second cut up there. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I want to bring this forward a little bit. Yeah, so now I've got the 2 cuts, and because I've already keyframed that first cut getting smaller, if I just press play, they're both going to close up from their relative location. Okay, so that's how you would add multiple cuts. And again, you know, because this wound 2 is a completely separate organism, I can change the scale of that. I could change how large it is. I could change everything about it. If I wanted to add the bump back in for both of these, let me just go through that in case you're not too familiar with bump. So let's bring this one back. This is my first bump setup, and I'm going to just duplicate that somewhere like that. Bring this mix up out of the way. All right, so I need to bring in first the wound outline. Goes into the height of the first bump. Let's bring this one up here. Keep things looking fairly uniform. And then I'm going to bring in my second wound mask, plug that into this third bump, which was the like wound 2 outline. Then I'm going to bring in my bloody texture to the color 2 mix of both of these mix RGBs. Yep, and then grab my first wound mask, plug that into the factor of this first mix RGB, grab my color, the output from my wound 2 mask, put that into the factor of the second mix RGB, and then I just connect these up. Make sure there's a flow of normal to normal, normal to normal, normal to normal, and then normal to normal. Okay, so now both my cuts have a lovely, disgusting bump, and they heal up. I've only put this on 50 frames, but maybe just a bit longer would be better. And of course, you could always go in. I'll set this on Bezier, and I could always go into the graph editor and make it kind of start more slow and then go faster and then more gradual, whatever. But so we've got this healing animation going on, and that looks pretty cool, I think. Anyway, right, that's part 1 of this. Yeah, it looks like a complicated, messy node. That's my bad. I'm not a very neat person, but it's actually not that complicated. So let's do, if he had a cut or a wound on his body where he's wearing clothes, especially on this kind of model because it doesn't have separate clothes, but there's kind of a way to work around it. So I'm going to select my clothes material, okay, and it's the same sort of thing here. I'm going to add an empty to where I want the wound to be. The reason I do this with empties is because you just got much more control. If you did it on like the UV or something and you wanted a wound, you have to hunt for that. You have to try and get that gradient to the right area, and it's not fun. So I just like doing it with empties because it's, yeah, you can set exactly where it's going to be. So I'm going to set in an empty here, and I'm going to call this, scale it down, apply the scale. Like before, I would go through and do a child of constraint, but I'm not going to do that now, but same as before. I'm going to call this empty, I'll call it clothes rip. Okay, and you'll understand why in a moment. So what I need to do first is create that that rip in his clothes, and then I'm going to create the wound afterwards, because when he regenerates, his clothes aren't going to regenerate. That would be stupid. That would be like his hair regenerating to the exact same length that it was before he got burned by a nuclear bomb. So I'm just going to go back into my skin shader, and I'm going to copy this setup. Just make sure to highlight one, Control and C, go back to my clothes, Control and B. All right. Now I'm going to set my cloth control as the object. Sorry, my clothes rip, whatever I called it. Let's bring this lot down a little bit and do the same thing as before. Mix RGB. Yeah, and this is going to control the factor. Okay, and just for now, you can see that's pretty small. So let's make it a bit bigger, and again increase the Z so it's flatter, something like that. And I can always get my clothes rip empty and rotate that on the Y. Yeah, whatever, something like that. So now this is the annoying part, is that I need to try and make this color match his skin color. And so obviously on a painted model like this, where the shadow has been painted in and stuff, it's not going to look great. But just for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to pull up the UV image here and just try to find a certain blob which looks like his skin. Maybe there. Yeah, it doesn't look too bad. It's getting the job done. And again, I could add in that bump. Set onto invert. So now it kind of looks like his clothes have been ripped. I know it's not great, but you know, this is the one where maybe we could go in and adjust the factor a bit. Try and make it look more like ripped clothes. Let's set these on like 1. Yeah, all right, something like that. Looks pretty good. Okay, so then I just repeat the same process as before, but I need a new empty to control it because I want the cut to heal up, but not the clothes, as mentioned before. And the reason we've done it this way is you must do the clothes to skin mix first, and then the wound afterwards. Okay, so Shift and D to duplicate this lot. Let me rename this one to be clothes. And then, so just to make things easy, I'm going to add another empty here, but I'm going to make this one a different shape. I'm going to make it a sphere. Scale it right down. Apply that scale. Okay, I'm going to call this one chest cut control. So then back into my wound over here. This is clothes, this is wound. Just going to choose that empty chest cut control. Yep. And then we need our bloody mess setup, which I'm just going to steal from here. Okay, and then I'm going to duplicate this mix node. Pop that there. Bring my bloody mess setup to be color 2. And then I need to bring this mask again down to be the factor of my second mix. Yeah, okay, so I didn't rotate my my new empty, so I'll just do that. I could copy and paste the exact rotation if I wanted to. Bring that up here. The Y rotation is 17.8, so I'll just do that on this one as well, 17.8, to make sure they're the same. And then I just need to go in and reduce the scale of the cut slightly by actually increasing the numbers. Yeah, which I guess can be a confusing thing for beginners. Yeah, maybe I want, whoa, not that much. Yeah, something like that. And maybe I want less noise on this one, or more gradient factor in there, but whatever. Okay, so the reason I've made this empty into a sphere and this one into as axes or whatever it's called is I want to parent this to, I want to parent the cut to the clothes. Yeah, and it's just easier if I can see them separately. So select this cut control, shift select the clothes control, and control P. Okay, so now I can move this whole setup anywhere. And then all I have to do is do the same thing on this one. Get my cut control, insert a keyframe on the scale. So I'm just going to bring my timeline up so you can see this. Yeah, and I'm going to jump to the end, shift and right cursor, and then SZ0, I, inset scale, keyframe, and then that's done. And yeah, I know it looks it looks a little bit weird with the skin color, but you get the idea. That's there. And then again, go in and do the bump on the blood, the same as we did before with the mix. That's basically all my wounds. So Wolverine's there after having a fight and heals up. Skin color isn't too bad. Yeah, but so this is why it's kind of advantageous to have a separate object for your clothes. But yeah, there you go. That is skin healing my way, regeneration. You could do the same thing with bruises, you know, like a burn. any other kind of skin surface damage, and it works quite well. And as long as you've added that child of constraint to your empties, wherever you move the character to, the wounds are going to follow. They look like they're disappearing, but they're not. That's just because Blender's trying to keep up. So that's my method for healing skin, cuts, whatever. X Factor healing power, regeneration stuff. So if you found any of that useful, please drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe and get the notifications so you can see the next parts when they are published. Thanks very much.